Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Mon Jacobson, and I shall lead a discussion here on the topic of miracles. Can we create miracles in our lives? Now, the word miracle is a word that is fraught with plenty of interpretations and misinterpretations and conceptions and misconceptions. Everybody has another meaning for the word. Today, miracle can be used even in terms of like miracle cures or miracles of technology, even on a scientific level. And then there's also the other extreme of miracle as a supernatural event, which some believe in and some don't believe in. And the debate rages on whether there is such a thing as a miracle, an objective miracle, where some people believe a miracle happened to them in their lives, and a skeptic will dismiss it and say, I can explain it with some natural ways. The Baal Shem Tov actually says, and I've discussed this at length in previous years, that a miracle is, and the difference between a miracle and a natural event is only frequency. That if the sun were to rise once in our lifetime, we would call it a miracle. But since it happens every morning, we get accustomed to it, and as such, we consider it to be something really, regular, routine. So essentially, a miracle, nature is just a bunch of miracles happening one second after another. So if someone were to study, let's say, the human breath, all the systems necessary for you and I to breathe easily, thank God, without any impediments, it could be classified as a miracle. But since so many people breathe, and we do it every second, hundreds, thousands of times a day, according to this interpretation, in other words, from a human perspective, from our perspective, we get used to something, so we get used to a miracle, it ceases to be a miracle. Which, of course, is a whole different take on the meaning of a miracle. Now, the reason I'm speaking about it today is because traditionally, this month that we're in right now is the first Hebrew lunar month. It's called the month of Nisan. The word Nisan actually comes from the root nes, which is miracle. Actually, the Talmud says Nisan is plural, so it's Nisei Nisim, meaning miracles within miracles. Which is the reason that this is the month that we celebrate Passover, which was maybe the first big miracle in history. The Jewish people were taken out of Egypt after hundreds of years of slavery in a miraculous fashion. Some of the mystics say that there are two Rosh Hashanahs, as we know. We have Rosh Hashanah that we celebrate at the beginning of the year in Tishrei, which was like 6 months ago. On Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, that season, the holiday season. And then we also have, like in a sense, a Rosh Hashanah, because we consider this month the beginning of the lunar cycle. So some explain the difference between the Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, for the natural process, and the New Year for the miraculous, the supernatural process. So that's the technical reason I decided to talk about this. Now, of course, those of us who, I guess it was Leonard Cohen who glorified depression. I'm saying glorified it, but made it popular, made it something you talk about, you sing about. So he has one of the classic songs called Waiting for the Miracle, where there you get a very depressing take on the whole miracle thing. The human beings waiting, people waiting, have their lives away for a miracle to happen. And it never happens. And they keep all their plans on hold, waiting for this breakthrough, waiting for something to take place. And it doesn't happen. Which is often the case that many of us experience, whether we talk about it or not, that we waited for some breakthrough, we waited for some opening, waited for some miracle, either from God or from somewhere, and never came. And as a result, we get resigned, and we feel that it's a plain wishful fantasy to believe that a miracle is going to take place. So there are many, many things. When you use the word miracle, we all would love to be able to say that a miracle can happen in our time, in our lives. We have something that will relieve us of the anxiety, the existential anxiety of the monotony of life. So whatever's going on in your life today, hopefully it's only great things, but we all get into a funk, and things aren't going so well, and we don't always feel that we have control over it. And we'd love to have some type of miracle. Maybe God is watching, or maybe someone will take pity and open a door for you. And there are people who tell me how much they've suffered, and they never seems to relent the pains. And then it seems the grass is always greener on the other side, that other people have it easy. The truth is, obviously, everybody's got their challenges. So this word miracle conjures up all kinds of reactions, and I thought it was appropriate to talk about it in this month of miracles, in this month of Nisan. Even if one believes and observes and commemorates Passover for whatever reason, for nostalgia, for history, for our parents, whatever the reason may be, you could always say, well, miracles happened then. What about today? What's happening in our lives today? So obviously the biggest question is what's relevant to us. Even if a miracle did happen hundreds or thousands of years ago, the question is today. In our personal lives, what is really the meaning and the significance of a miracle? And above all, is it real? Is it a fantasy? Is it just a nice crutch to hope and believe that something could happen, when in fact nothing really changes? As many, as I said, skeptics and cynics may remind us. So that's the theme of the discussion here. Of course, touches upon, in general, our hope, our confidence. Some people have eternal optimists, realistic or not. Pessimists call optimists not realistic. Optimists call pessimists not realistic. The joke goes that the pessimist says things are as bad as they'll get, and optimist says things could always get better. So who's more pessimistic, So the question really touches upon that whole attitude of our lives. Are we victims of circumstances? Are we in control of our destiny? It's really what it comes down to. So obviously, I'd like to, as I often do here, try to dispel some of the stereotypes around this topic. It really gets back to the issue of God Himself. What is God? Now, most of us, our image and attitude to God, where do we pick it up? Very few people, I don't know if anybody actually, went to an extensive course, whether in nursery school or later stages of our education, and to understand what God is all about. Most of us learn about God from early childhood, from our parents, and from our schools. If you grew up in a religious home, so there's a certain attitudes. Long before you made any choices, you were already being trained, indoctrinated, programmed, whatever you want to call it. It's called brainwashed. I mean, there are many words that can be used to follow certain systematic routines, rituals, traditions. I grew up in a home like this. I grew up in an environment like this. I could speak firsthand. It's not all bad. If you had a home where it was a lot of anger and fear and negativity, and religion was part of that mix, so obviously then religion becomes extremely dysfunctional force. But you're growing in a loving home. I mean, every home is going to have its traditions and rituals. Yes, religion could be sometimes more overbearing than other approaches. But the fact is, if parents are good, healthy people, why shouldn't they want to pass on to their children the standards or the values that they grew up with, as long as they're normal and decent and so on? But religion, of course, because by its very definition, because it's so-called from God, so it has this type of absolutism, which some turn into dogma, and dogma turns into imposition. Imposition turns into silencing and overpowering and dominating, and using fear and guilt and all the other negative, demoralizing tools to keep us in line. And then, of course, it turns very unhealthy. And in some ways, the Enlightenment of several centuries ago was a rebellion against such religion. a religion that was used as by tyrants, and used by people who were autocrats, and used it as a type of absolute power of control. So religion was just another control game. Some say today it's not religion that does it today, it's the economists or the business people or whoever is in control, the governments. In other words, in every society you're going to have the people in power want more power. And religion was just another tool. And therefore there was a rebellion against that, a very extreme rebellion, to the point that religion was rejected outright. To the point that some thought 200 years ago that there would be no religion in the 21st century. That it would all be over by now. But surprise, surprise, it's not over. Because clearly you can't really throw out the baby with the bathwater. Which that means is, despite the fact that religion has plenty of things to criticize, especially when it's in the hands of people who are using it for their own interests, but to suddenly dismiss every virtue and every element that religion brought to society is also equally disturbing. And you have the fanatic atheists today that are just as crazy as their religious cousins, and they're just as fanatic and intolerant of anything that smacks of the word faith or God. And I fully relate to all this because, as I said, I grew up and I know from the inside the flaws and the benefits, and tried in my own life as I grew up to try to separate the two. Because the worst thing you want to do is you don't want to throw out something good because it was packaged in something bad. It's like you want to take the Talmud uses an expression: you want the fruit and you throw out the peel. So even though there's no question that a lot of it is cased and in crusts of and layers that are not necessarily that healthy, and some people have really been hurt by it, I have to say, thank God I wasn't really hurt by it. So maybe that's why I was able to do that, to distinguish. And I grew up in a home, my father was a journalist, so my home was a religious home, very traditional, very, Passover was as extreme as it gets, but it was not a dogmatic home. Ideas were welcome, discussion was welcome, skepticism was fine. It wasn't like one of these insecure home where every question you asked you were like beat over the head, or so that was for me obviously a great blessing, because I don't know what I would have been like had it not been that way. I probably would have bolted, and I understand very well that when you're emotionally hurt by something, it's not easy to just say don't throw out the baby in the bathwater. The fact is, the good cells go with the bad cells, as they say. Like God forbid a cancer. And it's very difficult to separate when something that has some beauty in it abused you. It's very difficult to say, okay, I'll take the beauty and I'll throw out the abuse. Abuse has a deep impact and often will, as I said, will affect even the good parts. And sometimes you have to lose God before you find God. Even though it may not be a popular statement in religious circles, but I can understand it because the Baal Shem Tov actually says a very fascinating statement. I've shared it, I believe, here. In the prayer, in the classic prayer, the Amidah, the Shemona Esrei that we say every day, 3 times a day, there's right in the beginning we say Elokeinu, Elokei Avosenu, Elokei Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov. Okay? Which means our God, the God of our parents, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Right in the beginning of the Shemona Esrei, right? The opening. So the Baal Shem Tov asks a very practical question, that the chronology is reversed. It should have said first God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then the God of our parents, and then Elokeinu, our God. That's how the order goes. And that's how it's transmitted to us. First Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob discovered their God. Then they passed it on to their children, who became our parents and ancestors, our parents. And then Elokeinu, our God. And his answer is real simple, but I find to be revolutionary. His answer is, because the goal is to have a relationship with God that you own, that's yours, my God, not the God of your parents or the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So yes, education-wise, obviously, that's how it is. You're a newborn child in a home, just like your parents are the ones that have to feed you and nurture you and care for you. They also teach you. There's no other choice. So it begins chronologically that your first, whatever God you have is going to be the God of your parents, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But the goal is, and that's why we begin, that should not remain that you don't worship the God of your parents, you worship your God. That when you come of age and you mature enough to begin to think on your own, Judaism does not demand conformity just because our parents did it. On the contrary, that's not a relationship. That's conformity. That's a childish relationship. Relationship means that you have to own it. And to own something, there's some pain involved. Because that means you have to rethink it. That means sometimes things, givens that you thought were absolutes in your life, maybe not such givens. You have to rethink it. And hopefully, if your parents were healthy, so they gave you something to teach you, but then you come of age, and you can embrace it on your own. But sometimes if what they gave you, as I said, is tarnished or contaminated due to human flaws, it gets more difficult to own that type of God. And that's why sometimes we go on a search, and we sometimes have to go away from it before we come back to it. Obviously it's more painful that way, and I would not advocate that, but I understand why sometimes that has to happen. And Abraham himself was told, his biggest commandment, the first commandment in Judaism, in the Torah, is to Abraham, it says, Lech lecha ma'atzecha maladatcha min beis avicha. Leave your homeland, your land, place of your birth, the place of your parents. Same aviseinu, beis avicha, like Elikei aviseinu. Now in his case, happens to be his father was not exactly a man of God. His father was an idol manufacturer who was exploiting the situation. He was basically, you wanted God, he had one made for you. But regardless, it's still interesting. Every person has to go through this lech lecha in their life. Just like we cry the first time we go to school when we're children, or the first time we go to summer camp, or the first time we move out of our homes. That's how it is. But that's necessary for growth. And at some point you want to become an independent individual. And it's not a curse. It's a gift for healthy parents to see their children blossom and spread their wings and be able to fly on their own. And as much as a compassionate parent doesn't want a child to fall, but you will never learn to walk, God forbid, if your mother or father had such compassion, they wouldn't let you fall once. They watch you, they show you that they're there for you, but they have to let you walk. And they encourage you until you learn to walk on your own. Then you learn to fly on your own. A good bird has to have a healthy nest, but also has to have healthy wings. The nest comes first, but then come the wings. So every animal, different periods of time, begins first with being nurtured and protected by its parents, and then comes the day when the bird has to spread its wings and begin to fly, knowing full well that it still has that support back there. But now you have to start doing it on your own, and on your own is always more risky and more challenging. So the vision that most of us have about God is very much defined by forces that are not in our control. And the question is whether we really ever challenge it. Or do we just accept or reject it based on whatever it is that we got? Unfortunately, that's the situation for most of us. The time we turn into teenagers, and we do begin to explore whatever it is that we're doing. So some continue do exactly what they grew up with, without really questioning it, without really owning it, and others just reject it for whatever reason they may. And the truth is, the mature approach is obviously to look at things and try to distinguish what is the healthy part, what's not healthy, what can I own, how do I relate to it. Now, in Judaism, there's a concept called Nasa v'Nishma, which means when the Jews stood at Sinai, they first said, we will do, and then we will understand. Which, of course, itself is quite seemingly contradictory to what everything I've just said. Because I was saying that you have to own it. So why did the Jews suddenly, God said to them, "Give me ready to give you the Torah"? All the other nations said, "We want to see what it says in the contract." And the Jews said, "No, we're ready to sign the contract without even reading it." I mean, do you know any Jews that would do that today? Jews are very good at making sure they don't just sign contracts. So suddenly, a few thousand years ago, they lost their senses, and they just believed and trusted. Now, good, I understand God, but still, these were real commitments they were making for generations to come. So what exactly is going on? So this is not my question. Actually, a Roman philosopher asked this to one of the rabbis. In the Talmud, it tells the story. And he says, what kind of nation are you? You're a Russian nation. That's what he said. A reckless nation. God is ready to give you a document that's supposed to mandate how to live your lives, and you just rush to commit without even really exploring what it is. And we call this Nasa v'Nishma, that the Jews said we will do, and then we will understand. And it's considered to be a great virtue. that they accepted it without challenging it. But here's the main key component to the entire thing. You have to remember, when the Jews stood at Sinai, they weren't little children. These were a nation that, first of all, had just gone through 210 years of bitter Holocaust, with many killed, tortured, murdered, persecuted, and so on. They were not like a little star, like a deer caught in the headlights, naive, and so on. They also were children of men and women that had paid heavy prices in their spiritual journeys, starting from Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Sarah and Rivka, Rachel, Leah. And every one of them, the story is documented in the Bible, struggled. It wasn't that simple. Their lives were very difficult. And their faith was challenged all the time. And they were living in a society that wasn't very accepting of what they believed in. They had to go against the grain. They were pioneers. They were taking a road, not only less traveled, a road that was never traveled. Abraham pioneered a completely new road, which today you see the vindication, because we live in a world that is very much Abrahamic in the values of justice, of love, of kindness. But till 250 years ago, most societies were not built on principles that we today cherish, rights, human rights. That didn't exist 300 years ago. Individually there may have been people who aspired to it, but it was not institutionalized till the revolutions in the 18th century, 17th century, that led to a country like ours. And I'm not talking about, there are plenty of problems with this country, but certain basics, including the Bill of Rights, including the idea that all people are created equal and we have inalienable rights, and so on. This shouldn't be taken for granted. We take it for granted because we grew up with it. But it's relatively just 200-300 years old. As Chow En-lai reminded the Western journalists when they asked him what does he think about the American and French Revolution, he says it's too early to tell. 250 years in context of history is very little time. Yet the Jewish people always embraced these ideas, even though they could not institutionalize it because they were living under the control of other governments. But that was what they believed in. It's biblical mandated laws. How you respect other people, love, kindness, chesed, tzedakah, charity, helping others. Today what is called Democrats or liberal, whatever, civil liberties and all that, these are basic principles of Torah. I'm getting into the debate between the right and the left, but the general principles that we all today cherish. So the Jews standing at Sinai were not just some, as I said, naive little children who suddenly they met God, and God said to them, here, listen to the Torah, and they all simply bowed to it. They had paid heavy prices. Let's put it this way, in context of, if you put it let's call it in a type of romantic context, they had dated God for 300-400 years. It's a pretty long time. I know people go on long dates, but that's a long time. And Abraham so they knew God quite well. And they had debated about God, and they had debated with God, and they argued with Him, and they suffered. Had the Jews come out of Garden of Eden and suddenly they're told the Torah, they came out of Egypt. Egypt was a place where they did not see God. There was a Holocaust. There was a real Holocaust. So they challenged and they questioned, where is this God? So when they were standing at Sinai and this was after hard-earned efforts of seeking and searching. And then came the point, what are you going to do now? Are you going to commit? Or are you going to what's the word? You're going to remain on the fence. And that was the virtue that they did not say, you know what, we have to think about another 1,000 years. They committed. But it wasn't a commitment coming of children. This was mature adults who had thought it through, had seen a lot. And at some point, after dating, you got to make a commitment. Either you're in, you're out. And that was what they did, Nasa. But the interesting thing is they didn't just say, we will do. They proceeded to say, we're committed. And then they proceeded to say, V'nishma, now we will also understand and learn. So it didn't just stop as being just slaves to a master, whatever you tell us to do. Now came the process. But they did not let their, let's call it skepticism, and their fear of commitment get in the way, and they made that commitment. And that was because they very well intimately knew this God. They were not unaware of what this God was about. And now came the time, now you make the decision. Yes, we're going to get married. And actually, Sinai is compared to a marriage. So that's really the response to that. So therefore, Judaism absolutely demands integration, personalization. Yet at the same time, just like any system, if parents are going to say, I'm not going to teach my children anything. I'll wait till they get older and then I'll ask them what they want. You think your children are impressionable. If they don't learn it from home, they're going to learn it from the street. And if not from the street, from television or from the media. So a healthy situation is you teach children before they can ask. You can't say, child, listen, tell me, do you want to cross the street alone or don't you? That doesn't work that way. You have to teach a child, well, hold your hand and we'll cross the street. You get older, you'll ask questions and you'll figure out. It's also nasa v'nishma. Similar to how an army works. Soldiers, very competent soldiers. And all kinds of levels, all the levels in an army. What kind of army would function if everybody says, listen, I want to first understand before I follow any orders. You know what? Don't join the army. That's fine. But if you're an army, this is a matter of life and death. We have no time to now philosophize and explain every order. You have to accept it. But for you to mobilize and be drafted in the army, that's up to you. And, do your research before you join the army. But once you join, commitment comes first and then comes understanding. It doesn't work the other way around. Now, I know why so many of us may have questions about it, because we are not presented it this way. We're presented of people imposing their beliefs on us, is insisting and never giving us a chance to ask. So what I'm saying, in a healthy environment, what you have is healthy parents teach their children values, and also teach them that when you come of age, we want you to begin to ask questions and explore and challenge. And if you really want to see how this is obvious, look at the Seder. What's the Passover Seder all about? It's all centered around the children, and everyone knows the most famous part of the Passover Seder are the 4 questions. Beginning with, why is this night different than all nights? Now, unfortunately, the questions themselves have become dogmatic. Like, this is what everybody asks. But let's think for a moment what the questions, why are we encouraging children to ask questions if we want them just to accept everything blindly? We shouldn't even bring up questions. This is what we do and that's it. And now we're at a Seder. Our parents left Egypt thousands of years ago. This is what we do. It begins with questions. And to ask questions upon questions, as I've often pointed out here, if you look at the 4 questions asked at the Seder, and you go through the whole Haggadah. The Haggadah is the Passover book we read during the Seder, during the Passover evening. You will find answers only to 2 of the 4 questions. The 4 questions are, why is this night different? Is a general question. Then, there's different order, but the order I grew up with was the next question is, why do we dip twice? And why do we eat matzah? And why do we eat maror, the bitter herbs? And why do we recline during the Seder? So if you look in the Haggadah, and I've looked many times, and I couldn't find an answer to 2 of the 3. The question, why we eat matzah and maror, the middle 2 are answered. The first and the 4th are not. Why do we dip? There's nowhere in the Haggadah that tells us why. And why we recline also, there's nowhere that it's... So I was thinking about this, and a few years ago, after my children asked the questions, I said, I have a 5th question. And that is, why there's no answer to the 2 of these questions. Which, of course, it makes it really weird, because you're encouraging children to ask. So you assume, okay, ask, and we'll give you an answer. And here we don't even assume, we don't even try to give them an answer. So one smart aleck said at the table, at the Seder, the reason is because by the time the Seder is over, the children are asleep, so they don't even know if there was an answer. For all they know, there was an answer. They just fell asleep. Now, of course, that's quite a cynical answer, and what happens when those children get a little older, and then they check into it and they say, hey, would they just assume to fall asleep and never, get to the punchline? So, obviously, and here's what I thought. My thinking is, the greatest freedom of all is the freedom to ask questions. And we see this sadly in history. Whenever you hear of a regime, a government, that doesn't let questions be asked, or even better, they establish a Bureau of Truth and Information. You ever hear these bureaus of truth and information? Communists love that. The Nazis had it. All totalitarian regimes always have bureaus of truth and information, or whatever they call it. Now, why do you need a Bureau of Truth and Information? Let's be honest. Because you don't want any truth and information. That's why. So as soon as you hear there's a Bureau of Truth and Information, there's thought police. You know that somebody doesn't want you to do any thinking. And the first thing they do is control the airwaves. That was one of the first things that any dictator, any totalitarian, any autocrat does. You have to control the flow of information. The media, the airwaves, radio, and so on. Just look last year in the Arab Spring. what they would try to do to shut down the internet, because once you get information flowing, you never know what's going to happen. And then people start hearing about things. Some say the fall of the Soviet Union, I mean, it had many factors, but one big factor was a thing called Radio Free Europe. From the West, they were broadcasting shows that infiltrated. Now remember, good old communist Soviet Union didn't let anything into their borders. Not books, not newspapers, there was no internet then. But there was radio. And that was one of the factors. As soon as people hear about other people doing certain things, it gives you ideas. And say, 1 second, well, I want those freedoms too, etc., etc. So as soon as you know there's a Bureau of Truth and Information, you can rest assured it's neither true nor information. And as Thomas Jefferson once said, famously said, he said that if I had to choose between freedom of speech or freedom of press, I would choose freedom of free press. Because without a free press, there won't be any free speech. Because the press are like a watchdog. Now, what happens when the press are infiltrated, that's another story. We'll discuss that another time. But that's also, of course, an option. But the point is that when you have someone who's a free press, free media, free press is one of the Bill of Rights. Because you need someone to watch. If you control the watchdogs, obviously we're back to square one. So on the Seder night, and this goes long before the American Constitution, long before the Bill of Rights, long before all the freedoms that we so take for granted today. Seder night, from the beginning of time, based on a verse in the Torah, this isn't a custom that came later, it says, Ki yishalcha vincha, in the book of Exodus, when your child will ask you, you shall answer them. Which means not just you should answer, it also means there's a commandment to ask. It's incumbent, because we're intelligent creatures, we're intelligent beings. An intelligent person is blessed to use your intelligence. God gave you a mind for a reason. If He didn't want us to think, He wouldn't give us a mind. Animals don't ask questions about their roles. They don't. They just follow the clock. They follow the rules. Humans can ask. And on Passover night, one of the greatest demonstrations of freedom is that you're entitled to ask. And then, question of a wise person is half an answer, which perhaps is why the Seder doesn't make it's not that important. You'll find the answer once you ask. The main emphasis in the 4 questions is not that to get the answer, because remember, for every, as the Baal Shem Tov says, for every question is an answer, and for every answer there's another question. So even if you answered all the 4 questions, there'd probably be a whole other series of questions. The main point is that children and all of us are educated. Ask. You're entitled to ask. You must ask. The Haggadah itself, the word Haggadah means to relate. And it begins with Magid. What is relate? It's a dialogue. The Passover Haggadah is in the form of a dialogue. So to bring it back to our discussion here, which is miracles, my point that I'm making and elaborating on, because I think it's critical, is what is our perception of God? And we'll have a new, and if we review that properly and understand that and own our relationship with God, we'll also come to a new understanding of what a miracle is. You see, the nursery school stereotype of God is that God, that guy that sits on the throne in heaven with a long white beard and is ready to strike us with lightning when we misbehave. There are hundreds of cartoons like that. Now, if we passed around here a little note, everybody write down a short 5-line description of God. It would be an interesting exercise. What would you write? Think about it. What would you write? And after the prerequisite that most people would write something like the first cause, supreme being, the creator of it all, etc. Those are technical, personal definition. You find it not going to be such an easy thing to write. Some of us may write, I'm not even sure God exists. Or I'm not even sure what I think about God. I know that the word, everybody knows the word is the most famous word in existence. And everyone's got an opinion. Some are firm believers, some are firm non-believers, some are firm agnostics, some are firm in the undecided group, agnostic. And the guy that said, I used to think I was indecisive, now I'm not so sure, So some of us are in that category. And, the story, I can't resist, I always tell the story of an experiment I did in this class many, many, many years ago, many moons ago, talking about the moon, where the people like yourselves, at that point more of the core group were people from the arts and entertainment primarily, and I realized I was sitting there with a beard and a yarmulke, like this, It wasn't so white at the time. And I felt, you checking it out? And I realized that even before I opened my mouth, I'm at a disadvantage because, I don't know what stereotype they're associating to me. Like, for example, I may remind some people of an angry grandfather that schlepped them to synagogue on Yom Kippur, resentful, or a Seder table, or even war memories, but definitely not neutral image. So I tried an experiment. Instead of using any words like God or religious references at all, I just started a new language. Instead of God, I used words like higher reality, or the essence of it all, or the essence of existence, capital E, essence. And for a particularly new age group, I would use like non-existential layers of undefined energy or something like that. You get the idea. And instead of Torah, I used blueprint. Instead of mitzvahs, I used connections. Instead of Mashiach, redemption, I used destination. And I was waxing eloquent and pontificating about this journey into the essence of all reality, these undefined layers, and through connections and following this map, this blueprint, till we finally reach the destination. And I must say that people were quite taken, they were like pretty mesmerized by it. And they're like, wow, this is great stuff, what a journey. I'd love to do this. And then after a few weeks, one of the fellows asked me, so tell me, are you speaking about God? So I said, shh, yes, but don't spoil it for the others, And I realized right there and then that these words are loaded. We don't even know what it means. What does God mean? But Levitzer Barditchever told the famous, that self-proclaimed atheist, the famous story. He said to me, the God you don't believe in, I also don't believe in. That captures it all. Before we disagree about something, we first should define our axioms. What do we mean? We may find out that we disagree about the same thing. Like, if God is this guy with a long white beard and throne in heaven, like in some fairy tale, or like some big Rumpelstiltskin or whatever, then I would say also I'm an atheist. So then we agree that I'm an unbeliever. But if God is a different definition, then we can talk about it. And I really think that is, especially when it comes to religious issues, because they're so loaded and they have such implications. Because remember, God is not just a nice thought. God has implications. If God exists and He expects something from us, are we responsible? We're not responsible. It affects morality, the idea of a good God allowing bad things to happen to good people, the Holocaust. I mean, it's not a small matter, God. God is a lot of, it's not just, okay, man, great, there's a God, there's no God. It has real, far-reaching implications. Whether you're born in a traditional home or not. God is a big force. And you see, that's why the debate rages. The Bible remains the biggest bestseller in all time. And it continues to be a presence. And as I mentioned before, you have fanatic believers, you have fanatic non-believers, you have people ready to die and kill others in the name of God. So we're not talking about a small little matter here. We live in a world today that is haunted by terrorism in the name of God. Not terrorism by a few criminals, people who believe that the Western world is decadent, and there's a war going on between, they like to call it, the Zionist Crusader conspiracy against the Muslim world. So this is a big topic, more than just a nice theoretical discussion. And therefore, it's not that simple to come to really understand what does God mean. So if God is this type of nursery school fairy tale idea, so then a miracle is very easy to describe. We see them. It's like this God in heaven does something and disrupts nature and so on. Now, is this really the definition of God? And what actually did happen in Egypt after all? So anyone's watched the Ten Commandments from Cecil B. DeMille, the big scene there that everyone talks about is how he recreated the parting of the sea. Now, of course, he didn't do it with a miracle. He did it with technology. Today, of course, they can probably do a much better job. But then it was a big feat. When was it? The late 50s? The movie came out, early 60s? Ten Commandments? Charlton Heston? Moses? So there's that scene where the sea parts. So they figured out how to do it on screen. And, but what does that mean? I mean, if God intervenes in that fashion, why doesn't He just intervene on our behalf when we got problems? Let Him just split the sea or something, and make our problems go away. Many of us would like to cast a spell on certain people in our lives, maybe bosses or people who've hurt us. And why don't we just get God on our side and just suspend the laws of nature? So obviously, as skeptics will tell us, it's a nice miracles when they don't when you're not seeing them. Let's see this miracle happen today, then we'll talk business. Now, of course, there's all kinds of theories that explain how to explain the parting of the sea to make it that it actually did happen. There's even this theory that this professor was once teaching his class, and he was saying that his theory is that the sea was actually, the Red Sea was just a few inches. It wasn't even a sea that you can drown in. It was just a small little sea, and then some wind came and basically parted it. So it was like a symbolic type of parting of the sea. So one of the girls says, "Wow, that's amazing." He says, "What's so amazing? I just told you it's not." He says, "It's amazing that thousands and thousands of Egyptians can drown in so little few inches of water." So he still has to explain that part. Okay. The point is that all this is predicated on, I would suggest, a shallow or a superficial view on the whole matter. Remember, if there is a God, and I only say if as, let's say, devil's advocate, God created the universe. And God can obviously create something, can suspend the nature, but He also created nature and created laws of nature that are very, very absolute and very predictable. He did not make it. You can predict exactly when the sun's going to rise in the next 1,000 years. You can predict all kinds of, not predictions that are based on intuition, on hard, cold facts, mathematical equations, on the revolution and the rotation of the planets, the sun, the moon, the earth, and so on. The laws of nature are beautiful and eloquent and like a clock. You can know that there'll be 4 seasons every year. There's going to be a winter, and there'll be a summer, and there'll be autumn, and there'll be a spring, and the season will have an effect on the universe. You may not be able to predict what the weather will be like, as we had a mild winter here, but the general cycle, as I discussed last week, is all predictable. So God created that too. So obviously, it's not that simple. If He wanted to just have a free for all, there'd be no laws of nature, and every day anything is unpredictable. Imagine waking up, you don't know if the sun's going to rise today, or you don't even know if it's going to become night. We live in a world that is extremely driven by very structured systems, more structured than anything that exists in the human realm. We're unpredictable. Nature is very predictable. So clearly, when you want to appreciate God, you can't just talk about suspending. You have to understand what He created nature. And as a matter of fact, the Talmud actually says that for God it's difficult to part the sea. As a matter of fact, the statement goes like this, just to make you feel good. It says that finding a shidduch, finding a soulmate, is as difficult as parting the sea. So that means, and how could you say it's difficult if God created the sea and land? Why should it be difficult? Because God bound Himself to the laws of nature and doesn't just suspend them every morning. It doesn't work that way. There has to be a very strong reason to suspend, and when you suspend the laws of nature, it has consequences. Even in the science fiction realm of fantasy, like in those of you that are Trekkies, the Star Trek series or others, suspending nature or doing something that can have impact that has side effects that are not so positive. So it's not a simple matter just to change the course of things. So the point I'm making here is that it requires a deeper understanding of what the word miracle is. So what I would submit is the following, based on what I said earlier from the Baal Shem Tov, is a critical component is this. What is this God, and what's our relationship with God? That's the key thing. Does God control our lives, or does He not control our lives? Is there free will? And how does that play into the whole picture? Because on one hand, if you argue that there is no free will, and everything's predestined, so then you eliminate essentially every expectation and responsibility that the Torah or society puts on us. Because we have no control over our behavior. We're pre-wired, just like a leopard in the wild, a predator in the wild has no control that they're going to need to hunt and kill, and you don't prosecute them for that. So you can argue that a human being is also pre-wired, and everything is predestined. Which of course eliminates the whole issue of ethics and morality and choices and responsibility. because you could just blame it on our natures, and that's that. So clearly we don't believe that. Even in the most secular environment, we expect responsibility. You did something, you're accountable. Unless it can be proven insanity or something that you didn't control. But that's an anomaly. A human being is considered accountable. Which always struck me as interesting, because if you really look at the psychological Freudian Darwinian model that is the most prevalent one in the Western world, you can make a strong argument that we don't control anything. So why, everybody can claim insanity, just like animals in the wild. So clearly, even in the most so-called the most radical Darwinian interpretation of survival of the fittest, we also believe that we are more accountable than an animal in the wild. I haven't really figured out completely why. The general gist of the argument is because humans have evolved to a point where we want to coexist. So to coexist, we have to have rules. But listen, monkeys in the wild also have rules. And animals have rules as well. Except they're not imposed by man-made laws. They're imposed by their natural habitats and their natural environments. So I'm not going to get into that discussion right now. That's another discussion. But from a Torah point of view, in contrast to this model, the human being does have free will. The human being was created in the divine image, as a matter of fact. So as such does have free will. Isaac Bashevis Singer put it this way. He says we have no choice. We must believe in free will. That's how he put it. So there you got yourself a little quandary. Try to figure that one out. So with that axiom in mind, then God created us in a sense like partners. As opposed to subjects, we're partners. And we therefore control our destiny. It's not predestined. And no matter how you're wired, you're expected to transcend. You can have greed in you, and selfishness, and self-preservation, self-interest, but you're expected to rise above it. To be perfect, no one's perfect. But you're expected to grow and to become self-control in how you live your life. Expected to be kind and giving, and not hurt others, and not betray, and loving and consistent and committed. And there's no excuse. And you're responsible and accountable if you're not. And I'm not saying... I think there's proof that God is intervening. I asked for a miracle. So something's happening. I didn't say anything wrong, did I? Now, if lightning strikes in this room right now, that's going to be, the odds are against it, right? Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. And that's the expectation. And really, I don't believe in debates. I'm not looking here to go into a discussion, the arguments of the virtues of each side of the argument. Everybody can make their decisions. I'm not here to insist or persuade you. I'm just presenting the ideas. From a Torah point of view, there are higher expectations because, yes, we are wired. You cannot stop yourself from eating. A human being has to eat, sleep. You can't jump up 10 floors. There's certain things you just can't do. We're confined and defined by laws of nature. But when it comes to right and wrong, good and evil, as Maimonides writes, that we can't control what color our eyes will be, how tall we're going to be, how other personality features, even whether we'll be wealthy or poor, or wise or not so wise, or emotional. But how we'll use whatever is given to us in our lives, you have choice. So to say I grew up in poverty, that's why I'm cruel. There are people in poverty who are very kind, and there are people who are wealthy that are very cruel. So these are circumstances, these are different gifts and blessings that each of us are given. Sometimes a wise person, you could say, more wisdom, actually has more challenges. The Talmud says the greater the person, the greater their Yetzer Hara, the greater their challenges. They can be more destructive. Smart person can manipulate. So every strength is a double-edged sword. How will you use it? That's up to you. That's the Torah's view. And therefore, our relationship with God is a partnership, not a one-way street. You could say it's almost like a real partnership where God invests in us. gives us the resources, gives you life, gives you strength, gives you skills, and now you have to deliver. You have to develop them. You have to cultivate them. So it'd be like an investor. I'm giving you the money, I'm giving you resources, but now build a business. Hire, actualize, implement, be creative, and innovate. And that's the deal. So we're a partner with God in creation, in that sense. Again, I'm not going into the theological meaning of that. What does it mean, a partner? If God created us, how could we really be a partner? So suffice it to say that God chose that He wants us to be a partner and made us real, true partners. Does He own the whole thing at the end of the day? Yes, He does. But He decided to give half of it to us. So the same God chose to do that and chose it in a real way. And there's consequences. Because there's no question that He's in pain, God, from when He sees His own children and own creatures hurting each other. And yet, because the partnership is so vital, He will have to tolerate that. As I mentioned before, like a parent has to see a child sometimes make mistakes if you want that child to be independent and not clip their wings. And the same way God is, this is the Torah view, which of course complicates matters greatly, because it would be much easier either not to believe in God, that's one option, or a God that's much simpler. He takes care of us, we're His slaves, tell me what to do, and that's it. Once you create partnerships, then it gets complicated. And what happens if I don't live up to my destiny? What happens if I don't make good choices? So now there's a lot of risks involved here. It would have been a lot easier if God just put us on the stage and said, and we really wouldn't have free will, and just play out your life. Only the small problem is there'd be no purpose in it all. What does He need that for? A puppet show. So there's real consequences when God creates us in the divine image. And this is really not the class and the place to go into. It deserves its own discussion, what that means, how did God do that, how do you explain our dependency on God, what about our mortality, can we change, can we affect God in the negative way? The short answer is that partnership is partnership. And the Holocaust, which was such a tragedy, and other Holocausts, and even individually when we hurt each other, we're hurting God in some way, because you're hurting his God's creation. But God has to tolerate it because He chose to. He chose us as partners. And when you go with that attitude, everything changes, including the meaning of a miracle. So this isn't just about some one-way street, God sends a miracle to save us. This means that we can generate miracles. That's the key thing to remember, which is interesting. Because usually we think of miracle workers as some type of magicians, individual people, a tzaddik, a holy man, a holy woman, a prophet, and so on. So I'm here to tell you that each of us can create miracles. And I'll explain now how that works. But again, it's predicated on the principle that we're all partners. And a miracle really is no different than a programmer going into the code in the engineering room and recoding something, and the results will be different. The thing is, we don't know how to go into that engine room. But when you learn about what godliness is about and spirituality, it also has code. There's programming. And we can create miracles. Now, obviously there's no guarantees. It's not like I'm going to teach you now what buttons to press, because to be able to go there, you have to earn your way. You see, we all like the idea, if I take this pill, press this button, you get a miracle. The problem is the buttons here is about human responsibility. It's about being a more refined and more humble person, which is why there's no accident that when they say about Kabbalah, the real Kabbalists would always say, those that know don't say, and those that say don't know. Those who know how to press the buttons don't do it, and those that don't want to do it. Because when you're mature enough and you understand that a relationship with God is not about some magic tricks, you realize that you don't just you have to work within the rules of nature. But within those rules there's plenty of latitude to change your life. Every one of us can change our lives. And that's the greatest miracle of it all. So let's discuss that for a moment. And I'm going to use quantum mechanics as an example. Okay? When the first experiments and theories were developed around microscopic particles, they were very bizarre results that no scientist could accept. Because it completely trashed, completely countered all scientific theories and intuition up till that point. You may all know the famous line that Albert Einstein, the great Albert Einstein, who himself revolutionized science, when it came to quantum mechanics, he reportedly said to Niels Bohr, who was his colleague, he does not accept it, and his words were, God doesn't play dice with the universe. Because one of the bizarre conclusions of quantum mechanic level is that there's unpredictability, a fundamental and essential unpredictability in nature, which was absolutely radical, more radical even than the theory of relativity. Why was it so radical? Because the whole science is based on predictability. There's rules. We may not know the rules. We may not know all the data. But the whole point of science is that you discover those rules and then you can predict what will happen. And based on that, we've developed technologies that we can rely on. The idea that you can measure something and get two different results depending on who's measuring it was completely bizarre and absolutely rejected. The problem is it kept being repeated again, proven again and again, to the point that nobody could reject it. So Niels Bohr tells Einstein, as a response to his saying God doesn't play dice with the universe, he said to him, don't tell God what to do. So who's right? Did God create a world that is defined, predictable, or is there an indeterministic element to it? Now it's interesting because in the late 19th century there was a French philosopher, a scientist. His name was LeBlanc, I think, that said the following, and it was considered a major heresy to the church. He said, "Give me all the data on the universe, nature, and human beings, and I can predict whatever any human being or any part of nature will do till the end of time." Meaning that we just don't have all the data. Like if he was able to map every drop of DNA inside of you, he'd be able to tell you exactly what choices you're going to make forever. The only thing is we don't have all the data. There's missing data, which of course disturbed greatly the church because, that means there's no free will. We are all wired. The only thing is we're complex, so we don't know all the wiring. So you can't know because you simply don't know all the information. But give me that information, it's all going to be predictable. When quantum mechanics came around, it upset that whole thing because it established that there's a dimension in reality. And this is not faith, this is not religion, even though it sounds spiritual. That there's a dimension within existence that's absolutely unpredictable. And not because we don't have the data, because it's fundamentally what they call fuzzy, fundamentally unpredictable state of being. Yeah, I don't want to go into a whole discussion on this. If you want to read up on it, there's plenty about it. It's everywhere. The point I want to make is that when you enter that, if you take that as an example, we have today things that would be absolutely called miracles in the eyes of any scientist 100 years ago. The idea that in the space of the thread of hair, you can produce tremendous amounts of energy is counterintuitive to anyone of 100, 150 years ago, maybe 200 years ago. Quantity was everything then. Size didn't matter, because size was power. The concept that there's energy within matter, which actually that's not from quantum mechanics, that's Einstein, is a revolutionary idea. Once we've discovered it, it makes sense. You can create the nuclear power that is created through nuclear fission or fusion, is a result of that, is going into the particles and either speeding them up or heating them up to a point where they break apart and they release enormous amounts of energy. No one would ever imagine that in a room like this, you can create energy that can destroy the entire existence. Not even a room like this, even in small particles. Another thing, the fact that we can pack so much information. Now, I don't know the size anymore. I mean, Intel keeps on doubling, tripling, whatever. The amount of information that goes into a transistor, which is the basis of all modern technology. Do you know how big a computer had to be to process data information that we're processing now in the year 2012, in the year 1950, which is 62 years ago, not a long time. So, there are many people lived then, still alive. How much would you need to be able to store that amount of information? Entire blocks. Computers need to be entire blocks, literal blocks. Today you could have in your mobile phone more power, and it doesn't make any sense if you think logically. Now it makes sense today because we understand that within matter, within those subatomic particles, and by the way, computers is completely based on quantum mechanics. The way energy is produced, now even great programmers don't know the logic behind it. They know how it works and they know how to write the code, but like to understand it, no one would ever come up with such a concept until it was proven. Someone said a few hundred years ago, listen, and one day there'll be in a hair follicle, you'll be able to have a tremendous amount of information. People think is nuts. So to say the word miracle, that's a miracle. It's a miracle based on the limited myopic vision of people 100 years ago. So what exactly defines a miracle? A miracle basically means, as I think it was Jeff Bezos from Amazon, when he unveiled the Kindle. So everybody came raging that he's destroying civilization. Because till now we're reading books, and now we're going to start getting these e-books. It was considered like a major downfall of civilization. And he actually truthfully stated the truth, which no one even realized. He said basically technology is anything that was created after you were born. We happen to be, the only way information was transmitted for the last 400 years since Gutenberg's press is books, printed books. But before that, how was information passed around? It was through tablets, through papyrus. And Socrates said almost, when did he live? Almost 2,000 years? Less? 1,800 years ago? Socrates said when they began to inscribe in tablets ideas, he said that's the downfall of civilization. Because instead of using our minds, we're starting to put it down. Now, if you saw what we have today, that would be complete, apocalypse. So the answer basically is that none of them are downfalls. It all depends how you use it. Like they say, junk in, junk out. Computer doesn't change life. It's just a matter of what you put in there. And moral choices are still up to us. No computer is going to do that for you. And so the bottom line, my point I'm trying to make here is that miracles are very relative. What we call a miracle, what is considered, what would be called a miracle by anyone that lived back then, for us would say, 1 second, everybody's got a mobile little phone. I remember as a kid, we were fascinated by Dick Tracy. Why? Because he had this wristwatch where he would talk into it. And he would even see people somewhere. And it was a complete fantasy, and we loved it. I remember with my friends, we'd say, wow, it's unbelievable. Maybe we can create something like that. And it wasn't even a dream. I guess when they did it, Da Vinci and some others had this type of prescience, and they had a sense of things coming. But generally speaking, it wasn't exactly common thinking. And today, it's not even a miracle. It's very simple. You could have anything, anywhere, anytime, at your fingertips. Just think about things that we take so for granted. Forget about the internet and all the mobile. Just a television. Can someone explain to me how you could be sitting in New York City here and watching the Australian Open or some other thing happening, I don't know where, and you see exactly what's happening simultaneously, maybe a split second later, and there's no distortion. It's exactly the same person. That's how they're dressed. And there's no man inside this box. Tell me exactly how that happened. Now, I've read about it, and I've talked to PhD doctorates in this, and they all will say one thing. We understand that it works. We know what makes it work. But you ask me exactly how an image gets conveyed. It's translated. Images get translated into digital data, into electronic impulses. We're able to transmit that at very fast speeds, and then recreate it on this end. That's the process. But could somebody have come up with a type of technology that translates an image? A camera is itself also a feat, copying the human eye. But this is not just a camera. To translate an image into an electronic impulse, electronic data, and then transmit it, and then create a container that replicates it. And it's always accurate. There's no there's no tampering going on in between. That's part of nature. It's actually godly. God put in something in nature that allows us to do that. If you didn't have the subatomic particles, if you didn't have airwaves, if you didn't have light waves, it would just simply be an impossibility. You live here, I live there, and we never see each other unless we meet. This idea of communication, as we know it today, which we take so for granted, is absolutely a miracle, if you think about it. It's not a miracle in the sense of suspending the laws of nature. It's a miracle based on humans' limited perception. Is it so inconceivable, for example, Jurassic Park has already popularized it, that one day we'll be able to take the DNA from a dead animal or person and revive it? Why is it so crazy? I can see it happening. You don't even need to. And they forget about religion. It's just a matter. DNA doesn't die. If matter turns into energy, and energy continues to be returned into matter. We may not have the technology, but no one today is going to say that's crazy. That's too crazy. Why? That's not crazy at all, actually. What's happening today is almost similar, except not quite that. And actually, the Talmud says it. Someone, a skeptic, asked a believer, and said to him, "How do you believe in resurrection?" So his answer was very interesting. He says, "If you believe that a child can be born from nothing, why can't you believe that something can be returned to life that lived already?" Which, if you think about it, is a very logical answer. I understand. I've never seen someone resurrected, and it's hard to imagine somebody who's alive and then died will suddenly rise. I don't put it that way. But the idea of reviving a life out of something that turned into energy and bringing back the energy into matter, I don't know how, and I don't know, when no one knows how. But there's actually books recently written. I think there was a book several years ago, The Science of Resurrection, or something like that. And I'm not trying to go over the deep end here, I hope everybody understands, and trying to explain that everything is possible, but the truth is everything is possible. And that someone would discover to create an airplane that, forget about it, we can't even fly, let alone how much does an airplane weigh, how many tons? That it should defy gravity, but of course with thrusts and engines and all the power that it has, it makes sense today. We figured it out, because a few great crazy guys decided they're going to fly. And I'm sure nobody really was encouraging them to think that it's possible. And today they basically, we live in a different world. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the real word miracle, why it's such a beautiful word, and why we celebrate it in this month, is to tell us, don't get trapped in your preconceived notions of what's possible. Everything is possible. You don't want to call it miracle, call it whatever you want to call it. Call it that everything is possible. And what the Torah really teaches us, which is, I think, one of the most empowering messages, that you're a partner with God and you're not a victim of circumstances. You could change your life. Because really what it comes down to, I'm not getting now into can we create a miracle and suddenly create rain in the middle of a drought. I don't know about that. But create a miracle in our lives where we may feel hopeless, or we may feel trapped, or we may feel resigned, or feel like everything's working against us. The fact of the matter is, history is a testimony to the people, the few crazy people who did not accept no for an answer. They changed the world. I think it was reading Isaacson's book on Steve Jobs. So there's a quote there from the 90s. The Apple had this ad, which I think is brilliant. It says, "Those crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones that do." And frankly, Steve Jobs, even though everyone's taken with him, and there's no question he was a genius in many ways and did things. Some say he wasn't such a genius. He was able to, he didn't really create anything. But it doesn't matter. The bottom line, he was responsible for revolutions in our time. So absolutely, I think that there were greater pioneers than him. Einstein, that pioneered his theories, are unbelievable. I was just reading in the Times yesterday, Science Times, is this woman, also a Jewish woman, what's her name? Like the most unknown mathematician. And some attribute that basically modern physics would not exist without her calculations. So there were some brilliant people in history that changed the world. Now, their theories at the time may not have developed the technologies, but the technologies today wouldn't exist had they not broken through. Now, I'm not saying everyone here in this room can be an Einstein or can be one of these types, but in our personal lives, that's the most important. You can create miracles. And how do you do it? So here's a story that in 1960, a group of college students came to see the Rebbe, Lubavitcher Rebbe. And they asked him a lot of questions. They interviewed him. And one of the last question they asked him was that people that his Hasidim say he can do miracles. So they want to know if he can do miracles. Good question. They put him on the spot. the Rebbe, was a wise man. He knew how to answer. So he said, well, what people say about me, not everything you have to believe what people say about me. But if you ask me in concept, the idea of a miracle, it's not as crazy as you think it is. And this is what he said. He said, if nature is made up of forces that shape nature, and someone can go into the engine room, I'm paraphrasing, and manipulate those forces, so it's not such a crazy thing that the result will naturally be something different than the product. It's like the manipulation of genetic particles or of atoms. You could change matter based on that. And then the Rebbe said the following, which really struck me. He said, so if I share if tonight, if I can inspire you all to leave this room and do a mitzvah and do a good deed, the Rebbe said, I will have performed the miracle. When the Rebbe edited it, he took out the I and he said, we will have performed the miracle. I guess more humbler way of putting it. But, to me it's fine either way. But the point I'm trying to make here is, and the Rebbe was a man with, it wasn't just being cute. I was thinking about it. I see, and I deal with people all the time, and I see people who suffer greatly, people who have suffered more than a human being should suffer. And I've seen people who have been broken by certain things in life, and I've seen others who dug deeper and found hope, found ways to grow. What do you need more than looking at any Holocaust survivor? People literally lost entire families. It doesn't get worse than that. Completely alone. And no country, no land, nothing. And came to the United States or Israel or wherever they may be, rebuild their lives. They don't forget what happened. They're haunted by those nightmares all the time. But they rebuilt. What does it take? What is this spirit, this resilient, this indomitable spirit that you see sometimes some people have? And why some people just seem not to have it? And is there something you can do, or is it just you're lucky? So I'm here to tell you that's has nothing to do with luck. Because those people in the Holocaust were not exactly lucky. They lost their entire families. Because the spirit that we have and the powers that we have are far, far greater than we can ever imagine. And the greatest enemy of our own is not what happens to us in our lives. It's our stopping to believe in that what we're capable of. Which is why the greatest gift is to find a friend or a mentor, someone that believes in you. And especially as a teenager, someone young, find someone that believes in that person and encourages them and pushes you and challenges you to excel. That can change a person's life forever. But unfortunately, we don't have that many people like that in our lives. If anything, we have the opposite. People who discourage us, who, misery loves company. So since they're failures, they like if we should be failures as well. And, not exactly give us confidence and hope. Unfortunately, many homes and families we grow up in, our own parents, due to their own insecurities or their own suffering, and some children even of Holocaust survivors who may have made it but they still suffer from it, have created a climate in a home and environment that doesn't give confidence. The greatest blessing we can do for anyone is to give confidence to them, and the greatest blessing that can be done to us is someone to give confidence to us. And the earlier that happens in your life, meaning literally from the moment of birth, the better you'll be. It's as simple as that. So the fact is, from a Jewish Torah perspective, and this season is a testimony to it, the human spirit is unbelievable amount of boundless, endless energy, to the point we can't even imagine. So if a follicle of hair, if a hair strand, a little transistor can pack so much energy, how much more so a human spirit? We hear from time to time stories like recently, a woman, her doctors diagnosed her child as being autistic, severe case of autism, and their recommendation is you'll never connect to this child, put him away in a home, let him be taken care of. It's a medical impossibility for you to ever connect emotionally. And their mothers, and some know some, not common, who say, don't take no for an answer. And they tell the doctors, thank you for your opinion, but we will not do what you're saying. And they work their entire lives to connect to their child. It doesn't mean they heal the child. That would be nice, but that doesn't necessarily happen. The child remains autistic, and then doctors will say, and I've seen this, you see mothers 20 years later, and doctors are amazed how the mother connects. You never know. I have a sister who had a Down syndrome child a few years ago. The child is now 6, 7 years old. And I've seen people who've had a child with Down syndrome or other similar mental illnesses who hide that child. They even give away the child. And I'm not judging anybody. Everybody's got their challenges. But I saw my sister and brother-in-law embrace this child. They called the child bracha, which means blessing, because they actually sincerely felt she was a blessing. And the dignity that they gave her. Now, she still has Down syndrome. But I have no question, I could see that had a great impact on her and the entire family. I see how the brothers and sisters are much more refined. And so what human beings are capable of, we never can imagine. There was someone actually came to the Rebbe who cantor Joseph Malavani, has an autistic child, who was in London in a home. So he told the Rebbe that he wants a blessing for this child who's now, I think, in his 20s. So the Rebbe said to him, people mistake and think that autistic children don't communicate because they don't communicate with people. The Rebbe said that your child communicates with God. Which was, so Malavani was taken aback, in a good way. He says, he tells the Rebbe that you should know when it comes to prayers or tzitzit or anything like that, he has his face lights up when he connects to that, which you don't usually see in autistic, especially severe autistic children. The point is, what do we know about the human spirit? We barely know anything about the human body. As doctors, how much do we know about this little body called 5-6 foot frame, 100 pounds, 150 pounds. We'll stop there. What do we know about this little body? So we know a lot. Medicine today is a miracle. Longevity. Look at our age. Disease has been conquered in so many ways. People live much, double what we lived 70 years ago, almost. It was 45 years old, 44 or something like that in the early 20th century. So there's no question we know much. But the best doctors will tell you, whatever we know, there's so much more we don't know. Areas of fertility. One of the biggest mysteries. Some of the greatest fertility doctors will tell you, we know a lot, but there's some mysteries. There's sometimes a woman, everything checks out, and she won't conceive. And sometimes a woman doesn't seem to check out, and she conceives. Take the brain. The brain is the size of the human palm. This size, literally like this. It's the size of the brain. Okay? What does it pack? What do we know about it? Very little. Now we know a lot more than we used to know. But the more we know, the more we see how little we know. How many ideas can fit into your brain? Did you ever think about this? Like how many ideas? Like how many 2 + 2 = 4 ideas type of things? 1 million, 100 million. Hard drives, we know at some point, and they tell you it ran out of memory, and you got to expand the memory. What about the brain? Will it ever run out of memory? And it's much smaller than any hard drive, and not created by technicians. Just to show you, the point I'm making here is not just to point out how awesome and mysterious existence is to tell us that we have potential far greater than that you even know, and far greater than anyone knows. That's really the real meaning of a miracle. Miracle means that you can reach places that you have not reached and achieve something that would be considered impossible. Which to me, that's from my point of view, that's the practical meaning of a real miracle. That yesterday was impossible and today it's possible. If you want to figure out, you want to find ways to explain it up according to nature, fine with me. But the bottom line was humans thought it was impossible and today it's possible. That's a miracle. And maybe that's what we call a subjective miracle. Maybe it's perception. But the fact is, if I know that I see, seeing a couple who've given up hope, they're ready to divorce, and I could help them discover deeper strengths, and they build a life, and 10 years later you could see they've learned to love each other in a deeper way, where they were literally at a place where they were about to break apart, destroy their families, children, everything. And then and they look back, imagine had they not accessed deeper strengths. They would never have known what they had. That's to me a miracle, because nobody thought it was possible. Now, does it always work out exactly as we plan it? Obviously not, because that's part of the mystery. But to ever think that we are not capable of something is a big mistake. Now, this doesn't mean we should have the illusions of grandeur. We're talking about also consulting objective people who will help you see things. I see some people who have excelled in any given area, in the sports. in chess, in business, and so on. You see excellence, trust me that you had there someone who kicked somebody in the butt when they had lack of confidence. Because you have some of the greatest champions. And they could also get into a point where they just lose faith, they lose confidence. You read about some of the greats, Roger Federer and his height. Everybody gets into, suddenly something happens. It could be an injury, it could be something gets into your head. And you need somebody who's going to push you from good to excellence. And excellence doesn't come without a price. The price comes on being pressured, being challenged, being pushed, and above all, people believing that's possible. So why do we sit by a Seder and remember what happened 3,300, more than 3,300 years ago? It's not just to commemorate events that happened then. It's nice to say thank you and to remember what happened to our ancestors. Obviously, that's a beautiful thing, not to forget the gifts that came before us, that brought us to who we are today. But above all, it's because it means it could happen today, right here. The opening of the Ten Commandments is, I am your God that took you out of Egypt. The commentaries ask, why? It should have said, I am your God that created the universe. Creation from nothing is a much bigger miracle than taking people out of Egypt. Because that's in existence, redeeming them. So why don't we say, I am your God that created the universe? And many answers given, but one of them is because God created the universe. Of course God can create the universe. But can God help us get out of our traps? God is a creator, so He can create something from nothing. He can do whatever He wants. But can He help us? Can He give us the strength to get out of a place where 210 years they had given up hope? They thought they would stay in that God-forsaken place the rest of their lives. That is how the commandments open. Because then God becomes relevant to our lives. So, there's all kinds of arguments, the ontological argument, the religious argument, this argument, that argument for God's existence. You could look that up on Google, Wikipedia, you'll get the whole list of all the arguments, and then the counter-arguments, and you're usually left with, okay, so you have the world saying one thing, have the other half saying the other. But for me, the greatest argument for God, I don't even like to use the word argument, is not necessarily a scientific one. Because I don't know if scientific, Karl Popper, the great philosopher of science, said, a scientific theory has to be able to be disproven. And he uses God as an example. He says to say that God exists cannot be a scientific theory because you can't disprove it. Interesting way of putting it. So to me, the argument for God is not necessarily scientific or logical. It's the belief that it causes you to believe that you're able to do things that you never think possible. And if that works, frankly, who really cares whether you can objectively prove it or not? It's called, I would call it experiential proof. It's an experience. Like someone will say to you, prove to me that music touches your heart. Okay, so what will scientists do? We'll wire you up with all kinds of sensors to your brain and to your heart, your blood pressure. Start playing music, and you'll start seeing how your brain patterns and wave patterns and all this goes up. And you see, hey, music is touching. Now we all know, that's very nice. That's a proof on paper. But how do you know music touches you? Because when you hear it, it lifts your spirit. And I don't really care whether it has sensors, because if you connect me to sensors and it doesn't do anything, it'll still lift my spirit. I don't really care whether you can show it on paper. And frankly, if it lifts your spirit and it lifts your blood pressure, etc., but it doesn't do it to me, how does it help? You'll show me that on paper my blood pressure went up, but I don't feel it. So why do we accept that music touches us? Because it just touches us. I know that doesn't sound so logical, but something, that life is not so logical. The things we just experience. Now, of course, someone could argue maybe it's not really touching you, maybe it's manipulating your emotions, and maybe blah blah, maybe the whole thing is just an illusion. But certain illusions we live with, and you could say all of existence is an illusion, and pain is also an illusion. But and any proof for or against is also part of the illusion. Can someone disprove that? Maybe this whole thing is one big matrix. We all saw that film. How do you know it's not? A program. Maybe all this is not reality. And actually, if you study spirituality, they say material existence is just a shell for inner reality. Maybe it is all subatomic particles that someone's manipulating, and our limited vision just sees a table when really everything is energy. Now, what I just said is actually true. However, the question is whether this outer layer is real or just a projection for us to see. So the Torah believes it's real. God put it here because He wants us to elevate it, refine it. Then it's another discussion. My point is that the greatest message of God is that you are creating the divine image, and as a result can do anything you want to do. But we have to not confuse that with a childish, immature thing. Oh, it means I can do whatever I want to do, so I want to will away that my cruel boss should drop dead tomorrow morning, without you doing anything, shooting him or anything like that. That is not exactly, that's why I said this attitude that I'm talking about is a mature attitude. It means anything can be done because you're accessing forces that are deeper strengths within you. This doesn't mean the immature way, get rid of all the problems around you, that will solve your problem. Solving your problem means you figure out to have the strength to deal with that obnoxious boss. Or have the strength to leave the job if you need to, and not be trapped in wherever you are. In other words, you control your destiny. And we're not talking about praying and willing someone else's harm or good for something. The secret, the power of attraction. That if you envision a jaguar in your driveway, you're going to end up with one. So, even though that book has sold millions of copies, nobody has a jaguar in their driveway. But it sounds right, because it's a positive attitude. And there are elements in that book, an idea that are true. Think good, it will be good. The way neurons are fired, that's how they get wired. And your attitudes can change things. The problem is, it spills over into the sensational, into what we want to hear. Some trick for happiness. There is no trick. The trick is serious introspection, true belief in the power of the Spirit, and humility. To know that it's not always going to work out the way you think. That maybe if you access those deeper strengths, God may give you strength to get out of the situation differently than you thought you'd want to get out of it. We decide these are supposed to be the results. Maybe when you really dig deeper, these are not really good results. It's based on your limited perception. What you think is going to make you happy, maybe won't make you happy. And maybe when you reach deeper, you come to become aware of that. So we're not talking here about using our childish and immature instincts to just now to find another way to get what we want. That's not the point. The point is it's not getting what you want, it's getting what you need. And that's why sometimes we'll say in a prayer, I may not know exactly what I need, but God, you do. Why don't you send it to me? And many times what we really need is not what we think we need. I had a guy, this was a few years ago, who called me and wanted me to intervene spiritually. As if I would do that, as if I could do that. And this woman he was dating, and she's rejecting him. She wants me to some way put a spell on her, so to speak, that she should want to marry him. So I said to him, I knew him well, so I said to him, 1 second, maybe if you're bringing me into the picture, maybe she's not right for you. No, that's not correct. She's right for me, and I need you to help me do that. So that's an example. So obviously, that's not what we're talking about. So he wants me to help him figure out a way to get what he wants. The first thing I would do is to figure out, to teach him that's not what you want that makes a difference. It's what's necessary is what makes a difference. And if you got a little wiser, you may discover she's not for you. She doesn't want you. Maybe that's the sign that she's not for you. That's God's sign. That's the Kabbalah here. That's the mystical writing on the wall. So it's critical. That's why when you enter in this whole world of miracles, our so-called more juvenile instinct is a miracle. Yeah, just send me a miracle, figure out my life, and get it over with. I'm here to tell you that that's not exactly the way it works. But on the other hand, everything is still possible. But you have to be a mature adult about it. So it's not just about, a child says, I'm going to close my eyes and ice cream will just come. That's what I want. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about reaching deeper parts of your soul, which comes with a lot of humility, and also discovering certain panorama or a horizon that you realize, hey, something, maybe the things that I wanted last year or yesterday are not really that important. That's when things start opening up, when you get out of the way. So this isn't about digging deeper on your terms. It means actually going there to a deeper place, and it's not going to be on your terms, and that's precisely what you need. Now, of course, that, I know, understand, puts a little damper on the whole thing, right, for some. But if you really think about it, it's actually, that's the gift. You don't want to have a panacea, some magical pill. That's really why, in the true healthy spiritual path, you can reach unbelievable depths miracles, but you're not taking a pill here. So it's not about an artificial high, which will wear off, and then you turn back into a pumpkin. This is real. You go there, it could change your life. So, in a way, we are sometimes our own worst enemy. Simply our own. What I mean by that is our blindness, our myopic vision, our prior, our misconceptions, which is that itself is why we sometimes need somebody to help us step back, an objective perspective, which also takes strength to hear. Not everybody wants to hear something that is not convenient or not comfortable. We often like to hear, and I include myself. Sometimes you call someone and you want to hear what you want to hear. You want them to confirm what you already came to. And go a step further. Sometimes they say the exact opposite, and you still decide that they said that confirm, and you just decide not to hear the part that they disagreed with you. I'm sure that's happened in history more than once. So it takes a lot of honesty, a lot of introspection, and Passover is a perfect time to do this because that's what Passover is about. It's about cleansing the chametz, the ego, getting your ego out of the way and letting some new things to emerge, asking questions, digging deeper, and above all, hope. And I think any intelligent person, especially as Jews, we can say, we have been in hopeless situations I don't know how many times. And we're here today to talk about it. So Abraham, I don't know what kind of faith that man had, because he didn't see history. He did not see it in retrospect. Today we're Monday morning quarterbacks. You go back and you see it worked. The Jews did get out of Egypt, and then they got out of this and they got out of that. Look at after the Crusades and the pogroms and the Inquisition and the Holocaust, and we still sit at a Seder and we say, "Hisham delanu," that our faith, the promise, withstood it all. They wanted to destroy us in every generation, and we're still standing. To me, that's an unbelievable inspiration. It means that each of us is a walking miracle. Because if you study your life, let's study your life today. Study your parents' life, your grandparents. I guarantee you'll come to a point where you will not believe how did that person get saved in that situation. One little twist in the story, and I would not be here to tell about it. So if it happened to one person, okay, but talk about a collective nation here. So to me, that's in a way celebrating Passover, celebrating our possibilities. That miracles are possible, but a miracle, mature miracles, changing things because you see a new way to look at things. And if you don't find people around you that are supporting that, and are pushing that, and encouraging you, find new friends. Simple as that. That's a good Passover resolution. Last week I talked about 5 ways to find renewal. So you can go back to that. I can refer back to that. Go back to the video camera, to the replay, instant replay, and you could play that, the 5 steps. What I'm going to do next week is I'm going to go into more specifically, it'll be like a pre-Passover workshop, actually go through the Seder, of how we can use the Seder to achieve what I just said here. Because above all, it's about making it relevant. This isn't just about following rituals and traditions. I've been to many funny Seders where the whole thing was a joke. But I also discovered there's a lot of depth to it that's personal if you're allowed to be seen. Unfortunately, religion, Judaism, and Seder also sometimes becomes overwhelmed by the foods and the wines and all the other stuff. But really, it's a spiritual journey. That's what it ends up being. It's a journey into your own soul, into your own possibilities. And with that said, I wish all of you, real miracles in this season, in the areas of your life that you need it most, whether it's finding that proper soulmate, whether it's getting out of your economic or other difficulties and challenges, work-related, health-related, children-related, and everyone in their particular needs. Bonachayim mezena, as they say. Children in life and in parnasa, in livelihood. And I will also say that I would like to dedicate this class to someone that needs a real miracle, to Kayla Rus Bas Chai Rachel, who unfortunately is in a situation where she needs a miracle. So hopefully this class that was talking about this topic can, the merit of all of us being inspired and touched and learning tonight, and also those online, will be channeled to this little girl here that needs this miracle, 14-year-old actually, suffering from a serious illness. And of course, anyone else out there that needs healing or any other blessings. So may this class and this topic and the miracle subject actually implement itself in our lives, and not necessarily wait for us to do something, but obviously the more we do, the more we channel. So we will have a class next week, which will be the one before Passover, Wednesday night. What happens the following Wednesday? There won't be a class. The following Wednesday will not be a class. I'll be in Cape Cod. If you want to come there, I'll give you a class there if you like. Maybe I'll do something online. I don't know. Is it Wednesday? Is Chol Hamoed, right? Okay, but if anyone needs help in finding a seder, maybe a meaningful one, a spiritual one that can, with people that will give you support, please talk to me or to Velvel, and we'll be try to help wherever you may be. And one also announced the Omer book, which we have available here. Begins the second night of Passover. So some of you are familiar with the book. I've done the 49 days. It's like a workbook every day, looking into another part of your spiritual DNA. So we have the book available. Lift it up there. That's what it looks like, right? Good. And if you haven't left your email address, please do so with us. And finally, Philip will be giving his pre-Passover class tomorrow night. So if you want information, please stay in touch with us. And overall, the Meaningful Life Center is here to help you find the miracle within you. Thank you very much.